Well, hello, folks, and welcome to another episode of All Over the Place. So glad to be joining you today with another really cool conversation. As you've noticed over the last few weeks, I've been pulling in some fellow content creators and having conversations one-on-one with them about a variety of issues. Today, I have a conversation with a creator named Khadija Mbowe that I've actually followed on YouTube for quite some time. And I happened to run into them at a conference for creators called Trending Up in Washington, D.C. a few weeks ago. So we had a chance to connect then, and I jumped on the opportunity to have them on my podcast to talk about their process with understanding that they were, in fact, non-binary. We had a whole slew of issues that we were possibly going to talk about, but then we just sort of drifted into this conversation, which I think was really informative and instructive. If you're someone who has a lot of questions about what it means to be gender non-conforming or to be trans, and you just want to understand that issue better, Khadija does a great job of breaking that down for us from their point of view. Obviously, trans and non-binary people are not a monolith, and Khadija does not claim to speak for everyone. But Khadija is open to speaking about their experience from their point of view. So, of course, you all know that I'm doing these episodes of All Over the Place in cooperation with KGLH in Los Angeles. That's a radio station that I do a weekly show for called The Breakdown. And with that show, I have to keep everything to a tight 25 minutes. So there are times when I have extended conversations with people and have to really cut out a lot. And this is one of those days. This conversation ended up being about an hour long, and I had to cut that down to 25 minutes for my radio audience. So I'm presenting a show for you all here that is almost 3 times the length of what the radio audience heard. I think that may be a record, but there was so much interesting and meaningful information here that I wanted to present this particular conversation in its totality to you all. So this is one of the value-added perks that you get for being a part of the podcast and YouTube audience. And just a reminder, there is a YouTube version of this. If you want to see Khadija while you're hearing their story, you can do that on YouTube at youtube.com/Dara Star Tucker. And just a reminder, if you want to find Khadija online, you can find them at Khadija, that's Khadija, and their last name is spelled Bowe. It starts with an M, but the M is silent. It's Mbowe, Khadija Mbowe. I also want to throw in a quick reminder, as I like to do, about visiting the Patreon. If you want to support the show, that's the best way that you can do that. Go to patreon.com/Dara Star Tucker. That's Dara with 1 R and Star with 2. People usually end up contributing $5 or $10 a month. And that's a great way to be able to help us as creators sustain our lives as we do the work that we do. So visit the Patreon if you can and do support the show if you're able. Also, give the podcast a rating on whatever platform you listen on. We'd love to see those 5-star reviews come through. That helps us in the rankings. So thank you so much if you've already done that. So I'm going to send you over to the show now with Khadija Mbowe. We're talking about their experience as a non-binary person, particularly as a Black non-binary person. I hope you appreciate the information that you're hearing today, and I look forward to talking with you again next week. Have a good one. Hi there, folks, and welcome to The Breakdown with Dara Star Tucker. I am so excited to be with you today. I have another conversation that I'm going to bring you. I'm enjoying bringing you these conversations, particularly, I think, over the summer, where a lot of us kind of get out of our offices, get out into the real world. I've done some in-person meetings and some conferences, some personal appearances recently, and have had the opportunity to have some interactions with some of my fellow creators that I have watched for a long time. The person that I'm going to introduce you to today is a fellow creator that I have watched on YouTube for years. And I had no idea that I was going to have the opportunity to have an interaction with them this spring. I want to introduce you to a wonderful creator named Khadija Mbowe, who does a lot of content. Khadija is a non-binary creator. They do a lot of content around feminism, around intersectionality, all sorts of interesting topics that I am not necessarily an expert on. So I have learned a lot by but Khadija is very well read. That's one of the things that I love about them. So I'm really looking forward to this talk today because I enjoy watching creators who are thoughtful, who are interesting, and there's going to be some gushing that happens today, as there always is when I talk to these people that are they're just some of the best and brightest, and so they get into some subjects that I myself have not delved as deeply into, and they are very they're very studious, I would say, with their pursuit of knowledge. They're always recommending books that I have not read. Not to say that I'm even a voracious reader in the first place, but just I love to see the approach, the studious approach, and really even kind of an academic approach to understanding certain topics around feminism, around intersectionality, and all of these topics. And so, Khadija, would you please, just for our audience, kind of talk about some of your background and how you came to do what you do?
Firstly, can I just say you have such a lovely radio voice? Like you were talking and I was like, I feel so soothed right now. Like I was like trying to focus, but I was like, oh wow. But yeah, I just call myself a sociocultural content creator, loving provocateur, opera singing, pole dancer.
Wow.
I do a lot of different stuff, but I'm very interested. Like you said, I like appreciated you calling me studious because like I hated school. Like I was not, school was my nightmare. And I only ever like I do well on stuff when I was interested, but when I wasn't, it was like, oh girl, I'll just take a barely passing grade. I don't care.
Right.
But I am someone that's very curious about the world and people. I'm very curious about people and the way we relate to each other and understand each other. So that's where a lot of my videos come from. That's where a lot of the ideas come from. That's why it's sort of all over the place. And I cover a lot of things because I'm just like interested in all things that make us people and all things that make us examine how we relate to each other and how we understand ourselves. So,
wonderful. Yeah. Well, that's a beautiful launching point. And it's kind of a reminder to a lot of us that it doesn't necessarily take being highly degreed, I guess. I didn't even ask you what your educational background is.
I always say I have half a sociology degree. I dropped out. Oopsie.
And some of the smartest people are the ones who did not have the patience for school. So I just, in your work, your dedication to learning shows through, though, and your dedication to critical thought and media critique and analysis and all of the things that I love. It all just jumps right out at you. And so I would say even more so than maybe some folks who are out there with a doctorate. And it's important to have voices, I will say, voices that are able to communicate these ideas. I mean, it's one thing to go and study them, and it's one thing to sit around in a classroom and disseminating ideas and, contemplating all of these things. But the people who are particularly gifted to be able to communicate those ideas, that is a gift in and of itself. And so I like to say that my content is geared to people who are, I would say even like a really smart high school student, a 15 or 16-year-old who's maybe an AP, history or something like that. And they have an interest in this stuff, but they don't necessarily have a whole lot of real world experience with it. And I'm just, putting, not dumbing it down. I don't even like that term at all, but I'm putting it in very simple terms and very easy to understand terms. So that the information is not intimidating, because, a lot of the topics that I talk about, a lot of the topics that you talk about can be, it's just a lot to get your head around, so having people who are well-versed at communicating is so important. And another thing that I love about you, before we get into this conversation, I will gush just a little bit more. Another thing that I love about you is that you leave a lot of space for, I would just say, grace. You give a lot of grace to people who don't necessarily live in your world, who don't necessarily, like I said, you are a non-binary person, and there are a lot of things that you discuss that obviously are not necessarily mainstream ideas. They aren't things that a lot of people spend a lot of time meditating on. And even I watched an essay that you do, I call what you do like video essays. Khadija does like 30, 40-minute essays on YouTube. But, I watched an essay that you did today where you were reading a bit of bell hooks, and you were talking about this conversation between whether, that's popped up online recently about whether women would feel more comfortable being left alone in the woods with a man or a bear. This is a huge conversation that's happening on TikTok, and I don't know if it's happening on other platforms, but you were commenting on that. and then reminding the viewer, which I don't even know how this would play on TikTok. You were on YouTube saying this, but I think it's a safer space to have this conversation, but you were speaking about this from a man's point of view and reminding people to step back and understand how a man might view this conversation, while also obviously helping men to understand why a lot of women would choose the bear in that scenario. So that, those sort of nuanced, careful conversations are not necessarily something that are always welcomed online. In social media spaces. It is very popular to have these hot takes, to come out of the gate just 100 miles an hour for these extreme points of view. I get a lot of flack for trying to bring nuance into conversations like this. So how has that experience been for you? I'll ask you that before we get into our the crux of our convo. How has the experience of that been for you, trying to be someone who brings this sort of textured and nuanced voice to conversations like this?
It's interesting because for me, I just think I'm more interested in us understanding each other than I am in being right. So if that means that I have to take a step back, even with whenever I talk about videos, is slightly defending men or being a bit more compassionate to men, and I'm always still on their necks, so to speak. I always let people know, this was not my point of view a few years ago. I originally started reading bell hooks because I wanted to prove a guy wrong about his stance on men suffering more statistically in terms of being victims of violent crime. I was like, no, men don't. No, I was just like, And then I looked into the research and I was like, God damn it. Why is he right? The numbers don't lie. So obviously there's a lot of nuance in statistics as well, of course, but it kind of caused me to go, okay, I've had one extreme idea about, let's say, feminism or gender, and now I'm learning to add a bit more nuance to it and consider the other part of the human population, which is men in this theoretical framework. And it's interesting because you talk about feminism and the minute you say it, men don't think that it's for them. But like I say, if you read Feminist of Color, you'll find out very quickly that it is for everyone because, Black women weren't just out here, and other women as well of different other marginalized women weren't out here just throwing men away, because there was a lot more similarities in our struggles. Not saying that it's the exact same, of course, but there was a bit more similarity because of that extra intersectionality that men of color have, or queer men of color. You know what I mean? There's that extra bit. And I think we don't consider that as much when we talk about these theories, especially something like feminism. I've known plenty of my aunts and my mom and everything they do. And second wave feminists would think that they would call themselves a feminist. They would be able to work on their own. They would be able to take care of things. They, just all the typical things that people assume. But my mom would never call herself a feminist because she thought that was white woman nonsense, So it's, and for a long time I did too. So that's why I didn't want to call myself that either. But I just think that sort of nuance is very important. And people like to think that when you bring nuance, you're just trying to argue for both sides and you don't have any allegiances or whatever. And it's just my allegiance is to all of you bitches. Sorry, can we curse? I'm so sorry.
On the podcast version, yes. But
yes. Okay, we'll bleep it out. My allegiance is to all of you people. Okay. So I'm just trying to get us to come together a bit more. And I definitely do get backlash. I get flack. And sometimes I'm good at taking it. And other times I'm like, nope, I'm not doing this with y'all.
Yeah.
I'm standing 10 toes in what I will stand 10 toes in my nuance. And if people don't like it, they can go somewhere else.
Well, I mean, let's just lean into that for a minute, I guess. I don't want to force the conversation in any particular direction.
Yeah.
But I really want to kind of ask you about that, about this issue of intersectionality, about this issue of nuance and how that relates to your identity as a non-binary person. Now, if you are listening to this on the radio versus watching the podcast version of it, Khadija presents very, very femme. You would not necessarily immediately want to identify them as a non-binary person. But I guess
my running joke is the Mari, that's a woman. That's my running joke anytime I say it to people.
I mean, I'm sure that you have your own journey with this and probably get some pushback and some questions from it and how. So if you're comfortable talking about this, can you talk to us about how, your journey with that and coming to identify as non-binary and being femme presenting and how does all of this, I hate to be like using you like some sort of science experiment or putting you on the petri dish, but if you don't mind talking to us about that, how did you come to this place of understanding that you identify in this way?
I remember a friend years ago, like well over a decade ago, telling me that they were non-binary. And I was trying to understand it. And I was like, okay, like they were like, I'm going to use they, them pronouns. And I was like, okay, cool. And it took a little bit for me to get used to, but eventually it was fine. And I remember when they were telling me though, I was like, I just couldn't identify as anything other than a girl. Like it just could never cross my mind. I could never use any other pronouns. Mm-hmm. And then, this YouTube channel has helped me learn a lot about myself as well. In that the more I started to again read and learn, especially there's a paper that I always talk about called, I think the title is Where Black Feminists and Thought and Trans Feminism Meet. And it's a conversation between two academics. I cannot remember their names for the life of me. But I'll try and find it and send it to you. It's a few pages, but the conversation that they had, it was when I was doing a video about spelling woman with a Y versus with an X versus with an EN. And to some people that just seems so silly. It's like, who cares how you spell woman, blah, blah, blah. But it's tied into feminism. It's tied into women trying to, for some women, exclude trans women from their definition of woman, for others trying to say that they are a woman, but, the sojourner truth of it all. Ain't I a woman, but I feel a bit different. I guess apparently she didn't say that. I don't know. Anyway, fact check that. She did not. But fact check it. But feeling like the definition of womanhood has been tied to a certain look, a certain ideal. And I had to sit back and think, was that a picture with me in mind? Depending on where I live in the world and all that, right? Because I wouldn't have an issue if somebody would call me Jangha, which is like the way to say a girl in Wolof, which like my parents are Gambian. But this like girl, she, her, I don't know. It just kind of felt a little, as I started to learn more about it, it didn't quite fit. It felt a little like the gender norms and standards felt a little, I'm gonna be that person to say the C word, colonial, which doesn't mean that you can't identify with the gender that you were assigned at birth or anything like that. But I think it's just for me reading writers that ask these questions about the why of the gender conversation of do I have to be this type of person? Do I have to follow this gendered script just because I was born with this anatomy versus another one? And the more I started asking the questions, the more I was like, I don't really know if this gender thing holds up, if I'm being completely honest. Like, my genitals are a physical fact. Yes. Okay. But like, I'm more than just that. And people boil down your gender to feminine and masculine and then say that you only have those traits. And that's not true. I have a lot of masculine traits. I am very feminine presenting, but a lot of days as well, I'm wearing the baggiest clothes on earth. And like, if you don't see the shape of my body, you're not going to assume that I'm curvy. If I didn't have long hair, like, I don't know. I know I have a very feminine face. I can't hide that, but it's not necessarily the thing that I lean on for my identity in a way that I did when my friend first told me I'm non-binary and me saying I could never not identify as a woman. Well, I didn't have any other things about myself that I could hold on to for my identity that made me feel like me, besides knowing, yeah, I'm a girl and I like girly things. And now I'm like, there are so many other things that I enjoy. I like being strong. I like feeling physically strong. I like having muscles. I joke around that I just love being a muscle mommy. And like, I've always had a lower speaking voice. I have big hands, like things, just little traits. And I'm dark skinned as well. And that comes with its own set of people not always ascribing a femininity if you are a dark skinned woman, even if you are, there's this hardness that they attach to you. And so for a while, I leaned more into being more feminine presenting and more girly because I thought as well that would give me a bit more, I don't know, of the cachet that comes with being a woman, so to speak. But now, I've just that paper, talking to my friend, having more conversations with people and understanding that like Indigenous people have two-spirit, which is people that are both, and they don't think about it like the idea that people kept saying that gender is a fact and it's always been this way. For some people, it maybe has, but for a lot of cultures around the world, gender is mutable. It's kind of whatever. It's not a main focus. It's not the biggest priority. They're not so focused on man is this, woman is this, and the two do their separate things. But here we make it such a point from the minute somebody is born. We put them in there. I don't know if you remember the movie Ants from the 90s when they're like worker, soldier. Yes. And they put you in the two just based off how you look. That's kind of what it feels like we do to gender. Instead of having someone be born and allowing them to just play around with themselves, feel out what they want, what they like, and then just go for like, who are you as a person first, not who are you as a gender, if that makes sense. I know that I was talking a lot, but it was a lot for me to come to that conclusion. And I even felt weird saying it because I was like, well, I'm very feminine presenting, even if I wear baggy clothes. So what does that mean? And I had to sit and go, my clothes aren't going to be the thing that make my gender as well. Sometimes I'll dress more masculine. Sometimes I'll dress more feminine. I like both. I'm a yes and girly. I just feel like identifying just as one thing puts constraints on me, puts limits on me and what I think of myself. And so if I can say non-binary, there's so much more room for me to play around with gender and types and roles and ideas that I have. Something as simple and trivial as being the big spoon to a straight cis man sometimes, like I'm like, yeah, I can be a big spoon. That's right. Sup, come over here, cuddle, sit down, like taking on that role. And some people don't like that. Some people be like, well, no, I'm a man and I'm supposed to be this. But I always like to ask, who are you outside of that? Like, have you ever thought to ask yourself, if I wasn't assigned male at birth, what other things would I be interested in that people might deem as feminine that I'm just interested in, that I can still be a straight cis man, quote unquote, but I might, like there's a guy I follow, Consciously's cousin, Reggie. He started pole dancing because his girlfriend got him into it. And he is a straight man, but he enjoys pole dancing. It's a good way to exercise. He makes money doing it as a fitness instructor, and he likes it. But people will always assume that you can't do that because that's a feminine coded womanly thing. And anything that is feminine and woman is weak and therefore bad. And if you say that to people, they go, no, that's not true. It's just different. And it's like, then why do you get so upset when somebody says you're slightly girly or when somebody says anything feminine about you? Why does that make you angry if you didn't have a negative relationship and viewpoint to femininity? So to me, I just think we put ourselves in these boxes, we give ourselves these scripts, or we don't give it to ourselves. People, our parents, society gives it to us. And for some of us, they fit and it works. And for a lot of us, it doesn't. And for some of us, we like to traverse those lines and play around. And this is my life, gosh darn it. And I'm going to die one day. And I don't want to be living a life where I was sitting there feeling like, well, the world told me I was supposed to be a girl, so I have to do X, Y, Z, because that's what girls do.
Right.
I just find freedom in being able to say I am non-binary and being able to say that I am queer / pansexual, because that means that I am open. I say that I'm open. It's one of my values. I really am.
Well, this is such an interesting conversation to be having during Pride Month. And I hadn't.
We kind of stumbled into it.
Yes, we were not even necessarily planning on having this conversation, but I'm glad that you're open to it. I have a couple of questions within that for you. First, I want to ask, I won't derail the conversation too much from you, but first I want to ask how that has impacted your life and if that assignation is important. Would it have been possible for you to live into the philosophy that you're speaking about without changing your pronouns? And then secondly, how has this impacted your relationship with your family? Because I know that your background, you come from I think I remember that we've met once in real life before, and we had kind of the cursory
personal convo and, in the midst of a bunch of chaos at the Trending Up conference a few weeks ago. So, but I think I remember you saying that you come from maybe a conservative Christian background. But yeah, I kind of want to ask you both of those questions. I want to kind of understand how sort of taking on that assignation has impacted your life. Would you have been able to interrogate those same things without switching up your pronouns? And then I want to kind of ask you about how this has worked with familial relationships and, any sort of religious background that you might have. So can you answer? And I love millennials for this reason, because you guys are asking some questions that my generation, which is Gen X, did not have the opportunity to ask, and every generation before us. We all make our advances and we ask the questions that we asked and made the advances that we did. But you guys are you're taking things in a bit of a different direction that makes a lot of people, especially my parents' generation and older, it makes a lot of them very uneasy and very uncomfortable. And, they have questions a lot of times and don't feel the openness to be able to answer or have those questions answered. And so I appreciate you, being willing to have the conversation, first of all, but can you kind of speak on that, like the taking on of that identity and how has that, how has it impacted your life?
Well, so, people will still call me she, her sometimes if they don't know my pronouns, and I'll correct some people, and other times I just am not bothered. I'm just like, girl, whatever, because I understand that for some people it is an adjustment. And also I'm in a place where I know who I am. So yeah, I would prefer if people use the pronouns I tell them, but I also understand that for some people it takes a bit of time, right? Mm-hmm. If I know that people aren't malicious and they're just like trying to, I have plenty of friends that are like, oh my God, send me to jail. I misgendered you, it's, but
yeah, forgive me if I slip up, really true.
People do. And cause it's also like you're confronting something that I've had time to think about.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like maybe you're confronting it for the first time. Yeah. I've had time to sit and think about this. So even changing my pronouns for a while, I felt a little uncomfortable. I always joke around and say that anytime someone says they go by she, they, I'm like, yes, the she, they to they, them pipeline, or he, they. I'm like, girl, just put the other they there. You want to be they, them. Come on, and people worry about it because there's so much that comes attached to those, right? Mm-hmm. The minute you say you're they, them, people are like, oh, you're one of those. Oh, yeah. Anything around you. Oh, you're going to be sensitive to whatever. And it's like, no, I just like to be referred to as they, them so that you don't put all your assumptions about woman and girl on me. Mm-hmm. I just want I'm doing what I can, in my view, to be seen as a person first without the extra stuff. And that's part of the pronouns. But for a while, I felt nervous about it because I was like, oh my God, people are going to look at me and be like, that's so stupid. You're stupid. You're a girl. Shut up, you dummy. And I was just like, oh no, please. But honestly, those are the conversations I thought about. And I after had to realize, like, I don't care. Mm-hmm. I have spent a lot of time thinking about this. I spent a lot of time analyzing and unpacking gender in general. And for me, based off all the things that I know, even if I didn't identify as non-binary, the way gender shows up in our world and the way we make almost everything about it, it leads me to believe that might be one of the big problems and not necessarily people, but making these assumptions about gender and then separating ourselves and socializing us to not really be compatible with each other, especially if you're heterosexual. Like, I don't understand how men and women come together because the way we socialize boys and girls is to be so separate from each other and to be so different that it's like, how do you make loving relationships like that, And so to me, when I analyze that, or when I even read someone like Bell Hooks and she's talking about patriarchy and the problems of all that stuff, I think, yeah, that's part of the problems. And like, the other problem is just the gender thing. Like maybe we just don't put we can have people be genders, we can have pronouns so people can know how to talk to each other, but like maybe we don't put everything into this categorization so that people can discover themselves outside of it. And so others have to be forced to also have that realization. Because when I tell people I'm non-binary and they're asking questions and they're curious, they're also being forced now to think about their relationship to gender. And I love being a little menace, a little agent of chaos. I'm like, yeah, think about it. Think about it. Why do you like, but yeah, it took a little bit for me to say strongly, yes, I use they, them pronouns, especially presenting very femininely. But after a while, I was just kind of like, I'm a femme, they, them. Listen, physically, I look feminine, whatever, but I have masculine traits, whatever you want to describe that as. But to me, that's just kind of on the periphery. That's like the least interesting thing about me, honestly. Me being non-binary, it's like the least interesting thing about me. I said I was an opera singing pole dancer. Don't you want to, like whenever I talk to people, I'm like, don't you want to know more about that? But in terms of my family, it's also the thing of, I am at a point where I know to meet people where they're at. So like my parents are West African and Muslim. My dad is very religious. We always lived close to a mosque because he needed to be within walking or driving distance to a mosque. If something was happening, you could be graduating, getting your doctorate. If it's during his prayer time, he's not going to be there. Wow. Like my dad, this life, he's the most pious man I know. And when I came out to him, the first things he said were, well, you're still Khadija.
Wow.
Like truly. And so for me, having a religious person like that in my life gives me hope for other religious people, because it makes me know, okay, there are some people out here that will be super religious, will not understand all the things, but still accept you as you are. I don't talk to him about being non-binary because I'm like, I put my parents through enough. And also my parents, English is like their third language, or second language, I should say, not third. The second language, they speak a few languages. They misgender us all the time. My dad has called me he so many times. They don't care. So like to me, it's not really a necessity. And I even talked to my sister about it. Her and I agree. We're just like, yeah, it's not really a point being like, hey, I'm non-binary, Papa and Yeah boy, because they'd be like, girl, what is this now? I'm like, y'all already don't call me by the right gender, and y'all barely call me by the right name sometimes. They will go through the laundry list of everybody in our family and then get to my name. So to me, and I can be a bit silly about it for sure. I know some people that's not the case. For some people, it means a lot to them, and I don't want to take that away from them. And I don't want to be just so if the people listening, listen, this is one non-binary degenerate's opinion, okay? I do not speak for the others. You're just letting y'all know.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I've just realized that, like, in terms of that grace part, I tend to give people a lot of grace with misgendering, saying the wrong pronouns and things like that, or not even bothering to tell my parents about this part, because I'm like, they know me, I'm still me to them. So it doesn't really matter. And also, this was more for me than it was for other people. It was more for me to understand my relationship to gender and how I feel about myself than it is for others. So some people don't get it right. Yeah, sometimes it's a bit annoying, or sometimes I'll hear a she, her, and I like wince a little bit because I'm like, oh, it just feels so weird because I'm like not used to hearing that anymore. Like most people just use they, them for me, but it's also not the end of the world for me. It's not going to ruin my day. It's just, meet people where they're at. I've sat with this for a long time and thought about it for a long time. And a lot of people have got here last Tuesday. So I have to manage my expectations on what I think people are going to be able to do and how they're going to be able to change and how open-minded they're going to be. Doesn't mean I can't still try and get that from them, but I just also have to manage my expectations.
Well, you're at an interesting place with it. I don't want to make assumptions. I kind of don't want to make assumptions or delineations, I'll say.
You ask whatever you want.
Delineations that are not necessary to make, because I guess interacting with you, I was surprised to see that you were they, them. And as you said, you're very femme presenting and all of this stuff. And you sort of almost give the impression that you wear it a little bit loosely. And I think that tends to be your approach with a lot of things. You tend to be a little more malleable than a lot of folks, especially who are in the social commentary space that you and I both exist in. There can be a lot of rigidity in that world. And some of it comes from a place of a lot of folks having endured real trauma around certain things. That's the impression I get. It's like, okay, well, I am very strict about this because I have been because
too many people have played with me.
Right.
Too many people have played in my face. So no.
Exactly. And so you never kind of know where people are coming from. And this is kind of a general concept in life. Like I said, I see this attitude from you around a lot of things. This like, hey, you know, we're not kind of stuck in the whatever with this. This is, you know, we're working together. We're all trying to do better. Here's my history with this. I haven't always been here. You know, your attitude is much more of like, you know, that of someone who sees themselves as a bit of a bridge, not that that's your audience necessarily, but you're always accommodating to people who are not necessarily where you are, which is super helpful when you're having conversations like this, which are with audiences who are not necessarily planted squarely in the world that you're in. But like I said, I don't want to create any unnecessary delineations, but I guess I'm trying to understand in terms of your understanding of who you are and how you identify. Do you feel that there is any sort of delineation between how you came to identify as non-binary versus someone else who may be understood from birth? There's always been something different about me. This has never fit. This is always this sort of gender binary has always felt like an uncomfortable thing. And then you even, you know, physically, you can see that with them. There are certain people I will look at and immediately I will clock and say, oh, I'm probably dealing with someone that is non-binary. And, you know, 9 times out of 10, if I have that thought, especially with someone who's, you know, a millennial or younger, I'm usually correct. So do you create that delineation between do you say, hey, you know, I came into it this way. I was reading feminist writers and I've been, understanding this from a more academic standpoint or from a more sociological standpoint. And I have come to understand this about myself versus someone for whom this is, has been
more innate, maybe.
Yes, from day one.
Yeah. That's a really good question. For me, it's funny because it's kind of a little bit of both in that I grew up being a tomboy. I grew up really liking masculine things, and I hated when people called me a girl. I hated the girly girlness stuff. I like when I say I was dressing more femininely in my 20s, like there's a joke. I always think back to this. When I was in the 10th grade, one of my friends, I don't know what I said to her, and she was a lesbian. She looked at me, she was like, yeah, well, Khadija, you kind of dress like a dude. And I was like, shocked by that. Like, I was like, these are my good trousers. Like, what do you mean? I was like, so stunned. Like, because to me, I had just taken it at face value that I was a girl, but that I liked boyish things. And because of that, I was just a tomboy. Like people have that language a lot. And there are a lot of trans mask folks and non-binary folks that I'll hear talk later, and they'll be like, oh yeah, I was a big tomboy growing up. Like the writing was on the wall. And my mom used to do this thing where she'd always ask me if I was a lesbian. And I never and I remember asking my other sister, like, did she ever ask you this? She was like, no. And I was like, wait a minute. So what? So she clocked me. Like usually when you're like queer or something like that, you're the last person to find out. Like, I can't say usually, but for a lot of us, maybe that's the case. So for me, I think I took a lot of things at face value growing up. And then this academic work kind of cracked me open a bit and made me look back and think to all the times where I was like, I have really put on, in my early 20s, I put on femininity. Late teens, early 20s, into my late 20s, I put it on a lot more. I started to get my nails done. I started to wear makeup. I started to be more interested in what my hair looked like and presenting more girly. But before that, I was so fine and comfortable with being more masculine-like. And so I think now I come to a place where I feel more like myself, and that self is like the younger version of me, where every once in a while, it's fun to dress up. Like, to me, this feels like drag a little bit in a way, which sounds ridiculous.
That is so interesting.
When I'm dressed like this, like the people on the radio can't hear, but like I'm wearing a very femme top. It's like a little crop, little thingy, little moment, little vest moment. And I really just like showing off my shoulders because they're getting really jacked. So I'm like getting really into that. And I'm wearing blush and lip gloss. And so, to me, it's a little bit more costumey. It's a little bit more femme. Usually I'm wearing a baggy t-shirt and sweatpants. That is my favorite fit. I'm doing a show where we're like the pole opera stuff. I'm playing around with gender in it as well. I'm going to be dressed very femininely, very sexy stripper vibes. And then towards the end, when it's the me that I feel like now, the idea is that I'm going to be wearing a mix of both because that's more how I feel. So I think a lot of people come to these conclusions in different ways, right? Like you said, there are some people where it's way more innate, like they always sensed something was wrong and they were in tune with their body to sense that. And for some of us, for me, I was always in my head. It took me a long time to get into my body. I always felt alienated from my body, but I always just felt this weirdness with being a girl, so to speak, in the traditional sense. And I never had a language for it. So when I started to read more, or having a non-binary friend, starting to read more and learning that like plenty of cultures throughout history have just had people that are two genders or no genders or all this stuff. And then the more academic stuff, and then being in more queer communities and seeing the way people just play around and traverse gender, people that will look like straight cis men wearing full makeup and just having, it just let me know that like, oh, this really is all play.
Yeah.
And it can be if we let it. If that makes sense. Because I know for some people it is very serious. It's not just diminish the seriousness, I guess, of the impact gender has in many different ways that it shows up. But it's to say that I wonder if we thought about it a bit more as play, it would take some of the power away, if that makes sense. I don't know if I answered the question.
Yeah. I think you did. I think it's RuPaul. I love listening to RuPaul, but I think RuPaul talks a little bit about that of
oh yeah, we're all born naked and the rest is drag.
And the rest is drag. Yeah.
It really is though. Like to me, I feel that like today, I really do. And I remember like online as well, I've had people, that I know that are non-binary that were like maybe more femme before that. Yeah. They're like, when I'm in my femme bag, I just feel like I'm in drag a little bit. Like, I feel like I'm a little, and I've also been like, this is me being super vulnerable. I've heavily considered top surgery. It's something that I've thought about for the last few years of like, I just don't really care about having breastises and don't really want to have them. But then I also try to think, okay, am I doing this because I think I have to in order to be more legitimate as a non-binary person, or do I also just sometimes really want them to gone? Because I really just want them gone, like I don't know how to explain it. Like it's a weird feeling. Sometimes I do get a bit dysphoric when I look in the mirror and I see my body because I'm curvy, must be jelly because jam don't shake. I'm flat ass. So sometimes I lean into it, but other times it feels a little uncomfortable. And I have to sit with that and go, okay, is it uncomfortable because I hate the body, or is it uncomfortable because I hate the assumptions somebody is making about my body because I have boobs and a butt?
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a lot to sit with. Like, and I'm just being honest, I'm still in a process of it. Like some days I'm like, okay, if I did get a binder, maybe that would help. Especially when I wear baggier clothes. I just hate the idea of having like them poke. I just, like it's a weird relationship that I have with the top half, so to speak. And I've known I've known a few people that have gotten top surgery and are way happier, or like, this is what I wanted. This makes me feel good, all this other stuff. And yeah, it's just a decision that I think about, and I am someone that likes to take my time. So maybe one day I will, and I'll be a quote unquote true non-binary. I'm just being funny. Or maybe I just won't. And I don't know, it won't make me any less anti sticking with one gender.
Well, it's fascinating stuff. I really appreciate you for taking the time to kind of talk us through it, Khadija, because I think there are a lot of people who, for a lot of people, it feels just sort of, what's the word I'm looking like? It almost feels like an existential threat to have these kinds of conversations. It's just,
who are we if we don't even know gender?
Yes, it starts with people's perception of themselves. As you said, it causes people to begin to ask questions of themselves, and it's some of that foundational stuff. And so I appreciate your generation, period, millennials, for furthering these social conversations, and not being afraid to lean into it, because it's valid. That's the only point that I want to make. And when I talk to people who have questions around that. And of course, me not being non-binary, it's not like I'm here to just be the question answerer, but as someone who very much wants to be a safe space and an ally to non-binary people or LGBTQ people, sometimes just listening to people tell you who they are can be the most compassionate thing that you can do. Literally.
That part. You don't need to add your opinion. Sometimes just take people at their word. They're telling you who they are. You don't have to add your judgments.
Yeah.
You just listen and you go, hey, like one of my favorite, I don't know if you watch P-Valley. I love P-Valley.
No, I don't.
But it's an incredible show. Oh my God, I think you would love it. I love recommending shows to people. And for the audience at home, you guys need to watch P-Valley. It's about a strip club out of Chucalissa, Mississippi. The cast is incredible. The dancing, the strip dance sequences are just beautiful. The way they shoot oh my God, it's incredible. Like I have a deep admiration for strippers, in case you didn't notice. So they are that masculine and feminine combined in a really feminine body, and it's just because you have to be strong. Oh, anyway.
Yeah.
So certain strippers, I know a lot of them just anyway. God, me always interrupting myself. But there are a couple of characters that are queer in the show, and one of them you don't necessarily expect. He's kind of down low, so to speak, and he's talking with like his ex about his current person that he's with, and it's Uncle Clifford. And Uncle Clifford looks masked, but also dresses very femininely and uses she, her pronouns. And, for some people that might be confusing, but he's talking to his partner, and his partner's like saying all this other stuff. And he's like, listen, man, I don't ask questions. I just listen, or I just understand. Like, it's just what it is. Like, that's how she identifies. I like her, so it doesn't really matter about the rest.
Yeah. And I think it's sometimes it's a deep challenge to, especially when we're talking about family members, or people that are close to us, close friends, close family members, and you have someone who makes a switch up midway through life. And it's like, oh God, what do I do?
Yep.
I think it's, sometimes it's a call, and I hate to get deep with it like this, or particularly religious. I come from a very conservative Christian background, and I've had to, do a lot of questioning and interrogating of that world. And I've made my own journey through all of that, the deconstruction of it all. But I think there are a lot of principles that still carry over. I try not to throw out the baby with the bathwater. And I think there are certain situations in which we are being called on to love, to just show love. Like, what does it mean to truly love? If you're talking about a family member, if you're talking about a friend, do you have to understand it all? Do you have to, if you are not non-binary, you will probably never understand what it is to truly identify with someone who is non-binary. But do you know how to love? Do you know how to show love to the people that you love? And if you think that, the LGBTQ issues will never come near you, or that ain't my family, that's not who you probably don't know about
that part
who are LGBTQ, because they don't feel safe around you, and you are not a safe space for them. And so if you're wanting to learn how to be a safe place for your LGBTQ family members, then, a good starting place is just starting with love. Like you said, your dad said, hey, you're still you're still Khadijah, you're still who you are. And after that, it's our job to just keep our ears open and to listen, and just listen to understand, rather than listening to challenge or to tell someone what you think and all of these reflexive reactions that we want to have. Just because you don't understand it does not mean that it is invalid. So I think there's something very loving and something just very simple about just listening and keeping your heart and your ears and your mind open to just accepting people for who they are. And as Maya Angelou says, when someone tells you who they are, just believe them. It doesn't cost you anything. Just believe them.
And people always put that quote in like a negative of like, if somebody shows you who they are, believe them, like, or tells you like somebody showing you their bad behavior and stuff is fair. But also on the other side, if somebody's just telling you in nice and good faith, this is who I am, believe them.
Yeah. It doesn't hurt. It doesn't. And really, sometimes it's just a matter of dipping your toe in and being like, can I just be a little bit open to this? Just try it out. Try just believing people.
I'm just like, it's also, and this might be like veering into another topic, but I just think a lot of times in our online spaces with leftists and just in general, there's such a lack of vulnerability, a lack of wanting to be, for justifiable reasons. Like you said, for a lot of people, there's trauma. There's a lot of like, people have tried me too much, so like, I'm not going to be fooled again.
Right.
But it's also like, one of my moderators says this all the time, Bellamy, you know, you can't have community without being vulnerable. You can't connect to people without being vulnerable. That just doesn't work. People ask me, how do you talk to people? How do you get people to listen to you or be interested in what you're saying? And I'm like, I just try to tell people the truth of what I am feeling and what I'm going through and what it is. I'm not trying to act like something else. I'm not trying to put on something, because people can see through bullshit. And connection to me is about being willing to be open and vulnerable. And it's uncomfortable. But I've learned that I'm fine to sit in discomfort, and a lot of people are not. Yeah. But that's the price you pay if you want to actually learn and grow. You have to sit through discomfort. And it might be a discomfort of somebody that you've known your whole life, all of a sudden telling you they have different pronouns. Right. And now you have to see them in a different light. But do you really have to see them in a different light? Or do you just have to change the way you address them? You know, like, a lot of us don't want to sit with, it takes a lot for somebody to stop and go to everyone in their lives, hey, I'm transitioning. Hey, I am non-binary. Hey, it takes a lot. Hey, I'm queer. It takes a lot to do that stuff, to come to a place where you don't hate yourself, where you're giving yourself compassion, where you're able to say, this is who I am now. I know you've known this version of me, but this is who I am, or this is who I've always been. I was just too scared to say it. It takes a lot. And if somebody is vulnerable enough to tell you something, it's very vulnerable to hear as well. But it's also like, they are trusting you with that. Yeah. So I just always think, and this is why I try to give people a lot of grace, is because I think we don't handle each other with care, and we really should. Because you truly do not know what your compassion can do for somebody. Yeah. Especially when all they've gotten is people not being compassionate. Yeah. Yeah. And it doesn't always work. And some people just won't get it. That's fair. But I just think, yeah, especially to your point of like, there are people that maybe in your life don't feel comfortable sharing themselves completely or fully with you, because you've, in overt and covert ways, let it be known that you would not be open-minded to that. My mom used to always ask me if I was a lesbian, like I said before, and she'd always be like, you could tell me. Your dad will be really disappointed, but you can tell me. She would always say that. Wow. So by the time I finally told my dad in my late 20s, the only reason I felt comfortable even telling him was because I moved out. I was all the way across the country. I was like, I have done everything I can to protect myself, to where if he disowns me, I will be quote unquote okay. But when he said those words, I started crying, because I was just like, all I wanted was to know that he would actually be okay with it. And it turns out my mom was less okay with it, honestly. And she was speaking from a place of projection. You know, like my dad probably maybe back then wouldn't have been okay with it. But as he's gotten older, he's changed a lot. He's been more malleable. He's been more open-minded. And I just think that, yeah, as we age, that should be the case. We should be willing to sit with discomfort and have more patience and more care for people, especially the younger generations, because they need that.
Well, I'm just admiring of your generation, like I said, for bringing these kinds of conversations to the forefront, because we weren't allowed to ask these kinds of questions. I mean, definitely, you know, I think just the whole idea of are you gay? Are you straight? That was definitely a question we were allowed to ask. We were not allowed to ask questions around gender identity. That did not really start to come to the forefront until millennials came along and Gen Z came along. So this is basic stuff. This is basic stuff in the world.
But but we got to do it. This is the thing, what you're talking about. It's a term that they use, window of tolerance. You have a window of tolerance, and you have to be able to understand that like two things can be true at the same time, and they will most likely be contradictory and uncomfortable. And you have to sit in that window of tolerance. Like having BPD, which is borderline personality disorder, there's a lot of emotional regulation that's the problem. Regulating of the emotions. It's reconciling the fact that something is happening to you that is causing you to feel so dysregulated that you are like, your skin feels like it's on fire. But then also not being able to, just because that's happening, you can't just lash out at people. Yeah. You can't just use that as an excuse to treat people poorly or to treat yourself poorly. So how do you sit in that distress tolerance? I actually think is the proper term for it. How do you sit in that distress tolerance? How do you tolerate that distress? How do you manage that? And so I always like to say, for like everyday people, when you're hearing something that activates you, you have to sit in that activation first, because emotional regulation is part of emotional intelligence. We always talk about the understanding your feelings or being able to name them, but also regulating them as part of that.
Wow.
And I always recommend.
Oh, Khadijah's going to have the book.
Here I go. If one thing I'm going to have is a book recommendation. This is called Permission to Feel by Dr. Mark Brackett. And it's a really great book about the power of emotional intelligence. And yeah, he's the director of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, which is kind of like wild that Yale has that, but very fascinating. And when I just wanted to understand my feelings before I knew that I had borderline, I read this book, and a lot of it, coming back to it after, was really helpful, of like things like the ruler method, where you recognize, understand, you're learning, you're expressing your emotions. Like, it's all these different tactics that they have. They use social emotional learning in school to help kids have more compassion and empathy to people whose lives they may not ever understand. And then they also have something at the back called a mood meter. And it basically just talks about your energy on one axis, and then, energy on one axis and the pleasantness on another. So in like the bottom corner here, it's like you're having low energy and low pleasantness. So it gives you a whole bunch of languages to articulate that. Maybe you're feeling down, you're feeling fatigued, you're feeling morose, glum, disgusted, despairing. Like it's being more precise about naming your feelings, so you can be more precise about how you go about solving them or sitting with them. And it's helped me a lot, honestly.
Yeah.
You know.
What's the name of the book again?
It's called Permission to Feel.
Permission to Feel. And who's the author?
Dr. Mark Brackett.
Okay, Mark Brackett.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Khadija. This has been a very enlightening conversation. And I just appreciate your time and your willingness to work through some of the stuff with us. Like I said, one of the things that I really love about your content is that you are hitting on some stuff that I'm able to really learn from. And I feel like I do learn something every time I watch your content. Where can people find you online?
So you can find me anywhere. Well, okay, not anywhere, because I'm not on TikTok right now. I might be on TikTok when this comes out, but I'm probably not. But you can find me on YouTube and Instagram mostly. Khadija Mbowe. My last name is spelled M like Mary, B like boy, O-W-E. And yeah, those are the two places. And thank you so much, because like that's the other. I think it's when you're older and younger people are talking, it's hard to, I think, learn from them sometimes, because you're like, what you don't know shit. Stop talking. Like, it's just like, shut up. You have bills to pay, But learning from people, depending on who they are, but especially when they're younger than you, it takes humility. I've learned from people that are younger than me all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And they humble my ass. Like, I'm like, I should know more. I'm older. But it's like, no, there's just a lot of stuff that you can learn from people in a variety of ages. We trust older people to be wise, but we should also trust young people. So I just thank you for, being willing to have these conversations and even saying all that stuff about learning from millennials and Gen Z, because sometimes it feels like we're all just yelling at the people that are older than us and they don't have respect for us. And it's like, it's just nice to hear. Yeah, no, I mean, it's so easy to be that, geezer out on the lawn, like shaking your fist at the sky. And, it's such a cliche. And it's like when I see other people who are my age doing that stuff, and I remember, what it was like when we were looking at the older generation and like, oh, you guys just don't get it. There's no better way to just make yourself obsolete in cultural conversations than to come at them like, well, listen to me, Sonny boy, this is what you don't understand. Sonny boy. Obviously, there are certain things that I feel like, our generations, do have to pass down. And I always appreciate it when people are willing to listen to the voice of experience. But it's like, good God, there's so much we don't know. And it just strikes me, no matter what subject I'm talking about, and especially being in the space that I am, which is like this place of like education and information online. It's like, dear Lord in heaven,
there's the extent of what we don't know. It just far surpasses what we do know. So how dare we be so arrogant as to think that, we have arrived. Okay, well, when my generation, when we hit 30, that was the accumulation of human knowledge about sex and sexuality. And so where we landed, that's the place. And that's where it stops. Like, how arrogant. How utterly arrogant.
That's the perfect. I'm just like, I always try to tell people I'm smart, but I'm real dumb. And some people don't like when I say, like, don't call yourself dumb. And I'm like, you need to. Humility is a value of mine. Sometimes I need to be humbled and understand that I'm not smart about everything.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Sometimes it's all it takes. Just being like, I got some stuff to learn. Please teach me about this. And they're like, no, the world has not lost its mind. No, there's just some stuff that you don't know. So step back and just listen, and don't be so quick to paint everyone as being, all them people's crazy over there. It's like, no, let's stop. Wait a minute. And
points might have been made.
Yeah, maybe. Well, we done cackled in all of this. You all go follow Khadija. What I really appreciate about their content, other than, like I said, just the ability to add flavor and color and texture and nuance to conversations that tend to not be nuanced online. But I also appreciate, like you said, the humility, and just that Khadija will be the first person to admit that they don't fully understand a topic, or that they have had to make a progression in how they have thought about certain things. Today, I was watching a video of theirs where they were like, I wasn't even here, 5 years ago, I wasn't here on this topic. And it had something to do with feminism, I'm sure. But it was just like, just that kind of admission up front that, hey, I'm learning. And as I'm learning, I'm sharing with you. And then also Khadija is able to infuse, humor and just like a very interesting quirkiness into.
I'm very unserious. Very unserious. It's a problem.
That just from a straight up content creator standpoint, that's really cool for me to see, because it reminds me, I started watching your stuff probably at the beginning of the pandemic is when I started to see your stuff come through on YouTube. And that was before I started creating content myself. And it was like, you're one of those people you don't do what I do. And our presentation, there's almost nothing that's similar about us at all. But you still acted as an inspiration for me, because you were someone who infused who you were into your work. And so just from that, there are, a handful of people like Terrell Grice and Kev on Stage and Tony Baker. And there are a handful of these Black creators that I really paid attention to during that time, where it was like, okay, I feel like I have something to say. I feel like there's some sort of connection with an audience that I'm supposed to make, and I don't know what it is. And I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be offering, but it was inspiring for me to watch people like you who were doing what you do in your way, but you were infusing yourself into that. And it was like, this is really cool. This is so cool to see that I can see who they are, and it pulls you in. It just pulled me in. And so just thank you, from a content creators. I know a lot of people don't like that term, but thank you from just a content creator's standpoint, because my audience has taken off since then. And I knew that there was an audience I was supposed to connect with. And you were one of the people that really inspired me to get out there and to make my voice heard. So just thank you for the inspiration, Khadija.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. I was like, so nice.
It's just an honor to be able to tell you that, and to be able to talk to you, and to have you be a part of this. So just, thanks for being who you are. And I'm going to keep watching and keep listening. And I'm so glad that we're connected. I hope we can find a way to connect again soon.